Welcome to my field of dreams. It reaches far and wide. To you it might seem nothing much, but I stand here with pride. If you build it, they will come.
Hi, I'm Nemo James, singer, songwriter and author, and I'd like to welcome you once again to my podcast, Nemo James Travel Diaries. This podcast is ad-free, but I hope you will forgive me for including short excerpts of some of my songs. If you would like to hear more of the songs I include, you will find a link to them in the show notes. If you enjoy this podcast, please click the subscribe button and share it with your friends. It will mean a lot to me. On this episode, we will be travelling to Koh Jum, Kolanta and Bangkok. We woke early for the start of a hard day's travelling. It started with a flight to Bangkok and a 2-hour wait for a flight to Krabi in the south of Thailand, where we landed at 5 p.m. Our destination was the island of Koh Jum, which was further south and not easy to get to at that time of day. The usual way of getting there was to take a ferry from the port in Krabi, but that departed at 10 o'clock every morning, so it would have meant staying a night in Krabi. So we had arranged for the hotel to pick us up from the airport. That's when the journey became surreal in an exciting way. Every hotel we had stayed at so far had greeted us with big smiles and endless chat, and it was a simple transfer from the airport to the hotel. At Krabi, we were greeted by the owner of the hotel, though we didn't know that at the time, who smiled but didn't speak a word of English. So he just grunted and started walking with one of our suitcases, so we followed him. He took us to a pickup truck with an open back, tossed our luggage into it and pointed to the seats. They were very narrow and so hard they might as well have been wood, although the truck did look quite new. We drove for half an hour to a tiny, run-down village in the middle of nowhere and stopped at the end of an alley which led to the sea, where 3 long-tail boats were moored. Our luggage was put on the floor, and although there was plenty of activity around the boats, we had no idea which boat was ours, so we stood and waited for further instructions. 20 minutes later, another boat arrived and fought its way into the tiny dock. 2 men carried our heavy luggage effortlessly up a thin, flimsy plank of wood onto the boat. We were told to get in, and our driver joined us after loading supplies that we assumed were for the hotel. As we pulled away from what can only loosely be described as the port, it was sunset on a lovely warm night, so we couldn't have asked for a more magical setting. The boat moved quickly through the water, but it was still an hour before we arrived on the other side of the island, where our hotel was, and from there we were transferred to a tuk-tuk. We were driven along a giant pothole with bits of road here and there. We bounced around like we were sitting on pogo sticks until we came to a halt in front of a sandy path. 2 men took our suitcases on their shoulders and walked up the steep path with us, following them in and out of trees until we finally reached civilization, and a friendly woman greeted us in perfect English. After the usual welcome drink, we were shown to our cabin, which was as surreal as the journey had been. It was in a magnificent setting facing the sea, built on stilts with a long balcony and my favourite piece of furniture, a hammock. There were also 2 chairs, which made it an idyllic place to sit, with the nearest hut being at least 30 metres away, hidden behind some trees. We had booked a deluxe hut, which turned out to be nothing more than a lovely old bamboo bed with a mosquito net over it. There was no chair, table, or even a coat hook. I had the impression it had been knocked together with bits of wood they had found lying around, but we loved it. It had the only 2 luxuries that we couldn't do without: a quiet electric fan and hot water. In the centre of the small resort was the reception, and there, in the middle of nowhere, was probably the best restaurant we had found that holiday. The only problem was that it was quite small, and as people came from other resorts to eat in the restaurant, it got quite busy, so we sometimes had to wait for a table. After dinner, we asked the owner where the town was, as we wanted to do our customary after-dinner market shopping, but she told us that the town closed at 9 p.m. We planned to do very little on the beach part of our holiday, and we managed to do that with great success. The main Christmas event was on Christmas Eve rather than Christmas Day and consisted of an outrageously expensive dinner which most of the guests attended. The dinner was not bad apart from the main course, a kind of duck soup that was so hot it should have come with a government health warning. It was very tasty, and being the main course, I forced myself to eat it until it became too painful. Halfway through the dinner, we were asked to go down to the beach where music was playing, and a small group of kids went into dance routines that they had obviously been practicing for ages. We all enjoyed watching it, and it was great to see children having such a good time. We went back to the restaurant for dessert before returning to the beach for a fire show. I thought they meant fireworks, but it turned out to be one of those shows where someone lights balls of rope and spins them around. It seemed to be a big thing in Thailand, with lots of bars offering it. It was only the staff of the resort that were performing, and they seemed to have some trouble keeping the fire alight, but everyone still enjoyed it. We finished the night off with party games, which I have never been keen on, but joined in until they played musical chairs, and I went into invisible mode. Fortunately, the games didn't last long, and everyone went back to their rooms. We sat on our wonderful balcony under the moonlight, with the waves breaking gently beneath us, making everything just perfect. On Christmas Day, we went on a day trip to Phi Phi Island. We liked our little island so much that we weren't sure about going on the trip, but we needed to get to a cash machine. The resort owner informed me that she didn't take credit cards or even dollars, so considering there was nowhere on the island to get cash, it seemed extraordinary to me that she didn't make it clear when people booked. As often happens, though, once we had booked the trip, we started to look forward to it. We were meant to leave at 8:30 a.m., but at 9 a.m., a couple of the staff strolled casually onto the beach to get the longboat ready to take us to the ferry. When the reluctant motor finally started working, we were taken to the small ferry moored 100 meters from the shore. They appeared to have used the same designer for the ferry, being knocked together with bits of driftwood, but it did float, which is one of the qualities I like most in a boat. They started the engine, which was noisy when it was idling, but by the time we were moving at full speed, it was horrendous. On the plus side, it did force the loud and boring American next to us to stop talking. Normally, a boat has the engine built below the waterline, so the noise is suppressed by the water, but in this case, it was in the passenger area, separated by a thin wooden wall. Fortunately, I had earplugs with me as I needed them for swimming, so I put those in, but even then, the noise was pretty bad. The sea was rough, but as we were both good sailors, it wasn't a problem, which is more than can be said for the poor young man opposite, who spent the hour-long journey slumped forward, with his girlfriend trying to console him. There were 3 other people on our boat, and they were dropped off at Phi Phi Don, which was the big party island, while we went to Phi Phi Lay, the smaller island where the excellent film The Beach was filmed. In the film, the island was a deserted paradise, but what we saw was a bay full of tourist boats. Each boat had dozens of tourists in life jackets, snorkeling around, afraid to go too far in case they were run over by other boats. We moored in the middle of the bay, and our driver gave us some snorkels, telling us to keep away from motorboats, as if we had a choice. If one of them came speeding towards us, what were we supposed to do? We jumped into the sea, intending to swim to the nearby beach, but I wasn't prepared for the jellyfish that were waiting patiently for me. It wrapped itself around my arm and stung me like a swarm of wasps. The shore was still quite a way off, but I soldiered on despite the sea being rough and the stupid snorkel being so short that it kept letting water in. Federika thought I was exaggerating about the pain, but when we reached the shore and she saw the marks on my arm, she had to admit what a brave soldier I was. I had read that peeing on a jellyfish sting reduces the pain, but even in my youth, I would have struggled to reach my arm, and I couldn't see Federika obliging me. We had a quick walk around the small beach, and whilst it looked idyllic from a distance, up close it was full of rubbish and looked like no one ever cleaned it. We managed to get some snorkeling done, and there was no doubt there was a lot to see, but I spent more time looking out for jellyfish than at coral and fish. Back on the boat, I showed the driver my jellyfish sting, and he didn't look surprised, so I assumed it was not uncommon. I asked if there was anything he could do, so he poured some washing up liquid on it, which had no effect. On our way to Phi Don, we were given a packed lunch, which was part of the deal. While we tucked into our cold rice and chicken, eating out of a polystyrene box, we were visited by the ghosts of Christmas lunches past. The lunch was redeemed slightly with a gloriously ripe papaya, not quite Christmas pudding, but it did hit the spot. We spent an hour on Phi Don and were not impressed. It was packed with tourists, many of them drunk, and such a contrast to our remote little island. I battled with an ATM and managed to get enough cash to pay our hotel bill, and after a quick coffee, we were happy to get back to our boat. The engine was as noisy as ever, but I had no trouble sleeping through it while Federika sat on deck and enjoyed the sun and sea breeze. The last couple of days we spent in peaceful solitude, and as much as we loved Koh Jum, we were happy to leave. We didn't want to be anywhere like Phi Island, but we did feel the need for some nightlife, even if it was just a few shops to look around after dinner.
I got the Kolanta blues. It ain't nothing new. Day after day, it goes the same way. I ain't gonna stop till I catch me a fish. Then I'm gonna make my favorite dish. So look out, guys, my time has come. And this time tomorrow I'll be number one, with no Kolanta blues.
Our hotel in Koh Jum had arranged for us to be transferred to our next destination, Kolanta. We were told the main ferry came from Krabi and it would stop opposite the hotel to pick us up. We waited in the restaurant area at the agreed time of 12:15, but nothing happened. At 1 o'clock, 2 of the staff appeared from nowhere, picked up our suitcases and told us to follow them without any explanation. We followed them to the beach, where we stood on the shore with the 2 men scratching their heads and phoning around, looking like they had no idea what to do next. Neither of them spoke a word of English, so there was not much point in asking them any questions, knowing that the answer was always yes. It was very hot, and I couldn't see any boats on the horizon, so I was getting concerned when his phone rang. He answered it, and then both men put our 2 big suitcases on their shoulders, and we started walking silently along the beach with no visible destination. So there we were, on a deserted Thai beach, with 2 Sherpas leading the way. All we needed was a dancing elephant and a talking zebra, and we would have enough for one of those dreams you get after a hot curry and a few beers. We must have walked for a kilometre before we reached a long-tail boat which contained 2 tourists from a neighbouring resort. A man started the huge motor that looked like it was held together with seaweed and sounded like Concorde taking off. We headed out to sea, but there was still no sign of a ferry. The 2 other passengers had no more idea what was going on than we did, and I didn't understand why we were travelling along the coast. 15 minutes later, we came across another long-tail boat, which was packed with people and suitcases, looking like a boatload of refugees. Our captain pulled alongside, tied our boat to theirs, and turned the engine off. It was one of the strangest experiences of my life. We were 2 boats tied together in open water, drifting along with our driver playing weird pop music on his mobile phone and singing along with a high squeaky voice, like when you speed up a tape recording. 20 minutes later, there was still no sign of a ferry. It felt like we were in one of those films where people were shipwrecked and were waiting to be rescued. 45 minutes later, people were looking around nervously, wondering who would be the first to be eaten if things got bad. Then, out of nowhere, the ferry appeared, and it was already full. There was a flurry of activity, and while suitcases from the other boat were being thrown onto the ferry, our captain started the motor and untied us. To my horror, we started heading back in the direction of our hotel at great speed. Suddenly he stopped, waited a few minutes, and then he took us back to the ferry. It must have been some kind of safety thing regarding the other longboat. We were almost thrown onto the ferry with our luggage, and at last we were on board and able to relax for the hour it took to reach our new destination. We arrived at the port on Kolanta Island and looked for the free hotel transfer I had arranged with our hotel, and surprise, surprise, there was none. This time we didn't mess around, but jumped into a tuk-tuk. At the hotel, I explained to the receptionist that our transfer hadn't turned up, and after making inquiries, she explained that the driver did turn up, but he picked up the wrong couple. It always amuses me when people think that explaining what they did wrong makes everything all right. I told her we had to pay 200 baht for our free airport transfer, and her only reply was that we had been ripped off, as it should have cost half that much. I gave up. One thing I had to admire about the Thai authorities is that they hadn't allowed any of the big hotel complexes that had ruined so many other tourist destinations. All the resorts we saw were single-story bungalows, and although our hotel was one of the biggest, the 140 bungalows were spread out over a wide area and accessed by pretty little paths, giving it the feel of a spacious garden. We had a large private terrace, which was a joy to sit in at the end of the day. At first, it was a bit of a shock seeing so many people after the solitude of Koh Jum, but we soon got used to it and enjoyed walking around the busy town at night. The sea was lovely and warm, although jellyfish were a minor problem. Assuming there were no jellyfish the size of fleas, it must have been bits of jellyfish that had broken away from the motherlode in rough seas. At worst, they were like stinging nettles, but usually it was no more than a tiny pinprick. We spent most of the time lounging around the beach reading, and I was enjoying the Kindle I had recently bought and loaded with dozens of free classics. Many of them I couldn't get into, but I was really enjoying Uncle Tom's Cabin. We hired a motor scooter one afternoon and explored the north of the island. I used to drive a motorbike many years ago, and although I loved it, I gave it up as I always felt so vulnerable and never met a single biker who hadn't had a crash. One very experienced biker I knew fell off 3 times in one journey, so as it was only going to be a matter of time before I did, I sold mine. The motor scooter we hired was very small and automatic, so all I had to do was turn the throttle. Federika climbed bravely on the back, and we made our way up the coast. I loved every minute of it, but felt very vulnerable and wasn't conscious of my speed until a little old lady overtook us, walking along the pavement. The road was full of potholes, and when cars overtook us, they sounded their horn, which I assumed was meant to warn us, but the sudden noise was more likely to cause a crash than prevent one. The price of our hotel included a free New Year's Eve gala dinner. We weren't expecting much, and being a buffet, I was concerned that in such a big resort there would be too many people fighting for food, but we were pleasantly surprised by how well organized it was. Instead of one big station of food, there were lots of tables spread out, and the only thing lacking was common sense. There was a whole pig laid out on one table, which looked very inviting, but there was nothing to have with it on the same table. We had to queue again for the noodles or rice, and then again for vegetables, by which time half the meal was cold. As for entertainment, sometimes an act can be so bad that it becomes entertaining. You see this on programs like X Factor, where the most popular video clips were usually the worst performers. Our entertainment started with 3 ladyboys dressed to the nines in traditional Thai costumes, moving around in a slow and strange manner. They looked like they were holding a walnut between the cheeks of their arses and had to complete the dance without letting the walnut drop. Next came the star of the show, a tall, muscular ladyboy who dressed like Madonna and sang like Sylvester Stallone. She was the worst dancer I had ever seen. And bearing in mind I had spent decades on stage, watching people dance, that is quite a claim. Every movement was carefully planned so that not one of them flowed into the other. It was like someone doing a jigsaw puzzle using a hammer to make the pieces fit. I was mesmerized. Then came the games, one of which consisted of children sucking lemons, which dragged on forever despite no one being in the slightest bit interested. Later came the handing out of lanterns, which were like miniature hot air balloons, so after lighting the candle in the middle, it floated mysteriously off into the sky. The resort was in the middle of a long beach, so for as far as you could see, there were lanterns heading out to sea, which looked spectacular. Being concerned that further exposure to the hotel entertainment might have a bad effect on our mental health, we went for a walk along the beach and gate-crashed some New Year's Eve parties that were going on in the many bars. There were lots of fire shows with people limbo dancing under a fiercely flaming bar, only 1 foot from the ground. There were also a lot of people doing fire torch juggling. Instead of keeping fireworks for midnight like in most countries, they were let off throughout the night, so what with the lanterns and the fireworks, the sky was lit up most of the time. We arrived back at our resort for the countdown to the new year, which led to an excellent firework finale from our resort. We had originally booked 4 days in Bangkok for the end of our holiday, but having had enough of temples, we knew that would be too long, and so decided to stay in Kolanta for a few extra days. We wanted to change hotels and so went to a tourist agency to see what was available. The hotel they sent us to was the first we hadn't booked with Booking.com, and it turned out to be not only one of the best, but it was half the price of our previous one. It was not as professionally run as most of the hotels we had stayed at, but that was part of its charm. It was run by a family with the father controlling the bungalows, restaurant and supermarket, like a circus master. In the restaurant, there were lots of youngsters who we assumed were either his children or relatives. They were running around following the orders he shouted in a manner that was less organized than it sounded, as customers rarely got what they ordered. One thing that bothered me at dusk on the first night was an irritating high-pitched mechanical noise. I assumed it was from some kind of electrical device, and being determined to find out where it came from, I tracked it down to some weird insects in the tree. I assumed they were some kind of turbocharged cicadas that fed on chili peppers all day. Ironically, when I realized it was an insect, I was able to put it to the back of my mind and it didn't bother me anymore. One night I went to watch some Thai boxing that was heavily advertised all week, and I was surprised to see how well attended it was, especially as it was far more expensive than I would have expected. It started with 2 young boys around 10 years old, and after a strange ceremonial dance from each of them, the fight began. It was, however, a gentle fight, so maybe at such a tender age they were instructed to take it easy. Just as I thought it was going to be a boring night, the next fighters entered the ring, and they were in their 20s. After more weird ceremonial dancing, the fight started, and that's when the fireworks began. In the martial arts styles I knew, there were strict rules of engagement and elbows were strictly forbidden as they were so dangerous, but in Muay Thai there seemed to be no rules. The first bout was stopped after one of the fighters was kneed in the chest 1 too many times. Despite the vanquished fighter probably having several broken ribs, the officials impatiently ordered his trainers to carry him out of the ring so the next fight could begin. It also surprised me that there didn't seem to be a doctor in sight, which was another requirement in any similar event I had known. In the 6 fights I saw, all but one resulted in the loser being carried out. I know it is inexcusable to sit and watch people beat each other up, but in my defense, one of my ancestors, Eginardo, was a Roman general, so I claim it is part of my culture.
The streets are all empty now, as the comfort of midnight falls. The ghosts of 1,000 cars pass along curbstone halls, There's that place where we used to meet by the shade of that tree. A time so long ago, time of you and me.
The house is so empty now, a monument to broken dreams, the ghost of 1,000 loves, the threads of 1,000 seams. I try so hard to start again, but I never found a way. One stupid act of madness, forever I must pay.
I have my pride,
Your foolish pride,
it's all I have,
I know,
but I have this pain,
and so do I,
and I don't think it will go.
Arriving back at the resort at 11:30 was a bit scary when the dogs I had made a fuss of during the day, including donating some of my Snickers bar, decided I was a burglar and started barking as if they were going into full attack mode. Barking dogs never usually bothered me, but one in particular was very close to my heels and looked like he was going to pounce at any minute. It should have recognized me, but I suppose to racist Thai dogs all Europeans look the same. The day arrived when it was time to start making our way home, and we had booked seats on a minibus to take us to Krabi Airport. Any remaining guilt about not being more adventurous during our holiday was dispelled after 2 minutes on that bus. We were the last to be picked up and so ended up with the 2 remaining seats at the back. There was luggage packed tight around us, and we only got the dregs of any air conditioning the bus might have had. It was only a 2-hour ride, so I couldn't imagine what it must have been like for journeys that took up to 24 hours on bad roads. Considering the amount of money made from tourism in that area, I was surprised that so little had been spent on infrastructure. The journey should have taken 45 minutes, but we had to cross 2 estuaries to get to the airport. Neither of them was very wide, so you would expect to be able to cross them on bridges, but the only way was on ferries that looked like the landing crafts used on D-Day after they had been hit by several hundred shells. We arrived at the airport much too early, but time passed quickly, and it wasn't long before we were back at the hotel in Bangkok, where we started. It was good staying in the same hotel as we knew our way around, but it was also a little sad as it brought back memories of the restaurant 6 weeks earlier, with the excitement of the holiday in front of us. Next morning, we went to the Sunday market on the SkyTrain, and I hadn't realized on our first visit how completely over-the-top advertising was in Bangkok. Every inch of the platform was covered with advertising banners and a big TV screen showing adverts with the sound up really high. The outside of the trains was also covered in advertising, and inside every carriage there were several TV screens playing non-stop adverts. The Sunday market was as crazy as ever, and with everything being so cheap, it seemed silly not to buy things even if we wouldn't need them for a while. I wanted to buy lots of baseball caps, but most of them were in the ridiculous fashion of being frayed and worn out. I had thrown away so many beloved caps because they were worn out, and there they were, selling them as new. Just as we were leaving, there was a stall getting rid of perfectly good caps at 5 for £1. I suppose they looked too new to be in fashion, but I was happy to buy 5. Our last day in Bangkok was spent visiting the famous reclining Buddha and then on to Chinatown on a tuk-tuk. For the first time, I felt the pollution get to me as the traffic was terrible. It was well worth the visit as we managed to find our way to an interesting area that sold all sorts of things, including some outrageously expensive tea, which we bought a little of. There was food stacked up everywhere in conditions that would have given an English health inspector a heart attack. At one stall, there was a man chopping some strange-looking meat when a rat ran right past him. He glanced at the rat and went back to his chopping as if it were a common occurrence. And so our long journey home started with my first flight on a magnificent Air Emirates A380 Airbus, a double-decker plane with passengers boarding on the upper and lower floors at the same time. I read that the first-class compartment had private suites and showers. Even down in the peasant class, there was more legroom than in any other aircraft I had been on. Standing at the back of the plane, I could hardly see the front. It was so far on the horizon. The flight was almost full, so there must have been around 500 passengers, but we boarded quickly, and the service was very efficient. We had a 7-hour stopover in Hong Kong. The last time I landed at Hong Kong Airport, it was still in the middle of the city, and planes landed between blocks of apartments, so you could look out the window and see people's washing hanging out to dry. The new airport was built outside town, so we had to take an express train to the centre. A very efficient and friendly young girl gave us detailed directions on where to go and what to do with our limited time, but as simple as the instructions were, we managed to get off at the wrong stop. We were on one of the busiest underground systems in the world, but despite the extraordinary number of people, it all seemed to run smoothly without being too crowded. We didn't have a lot of time, but we managed to have a quick dinner and visit the highest bar in the world at the Ritz-Carlton. There wasn't much to see from the top, as it was so high that it was quite misty, and the outside windows were misted up, but at the bottom of the hotel there was a wonderful view of the city and river, so the visit was well worthwhile. It was a very enjoyable holiday, and the 6 weeks seemed to pass by in a flash. As always, we stayed with my mother for a couple of weeks near Worthing before going back to Croatia. It was a struggle adjusting to the cold, wet English winter, but after 6 weeks of noodles, we at least had the consolation of a nice plate of fish and chips. Thank you for listening to Nemo James Travel Diaries. Photos and videos of my adventures, together with my music and the books I have published, can be found on my website www.nemojames.com/travels. You will also find details of my mobile phone app, Word Banker, which is designed to help you build a foreign language vocabulary. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please click the subscribe button and share it with your friends. It will mean a lot to me. In the next episode, we will be going on a Caribbean cruise.
Do you like the songs I've sung to you? Do you like the time that we've been through? Do you like my music? Do you like to sing along? Yes, we like the songs that you have sung. We like the friends that we've become. We like your music. We like your music. We like your music and the words of your song.